Mr. President, pursuant to Section 36B1 of the Arms Export Control Act, I move to discharge the Committee on Foreign Relations from further consideration of S.J. Res. 138.
The clerk will report the motion.
The senator from Vermont, Mr. Sanders, moves to discharge Senate Joint Resolution 138, providing for congressional disapproval of the proposed foreign military sale to the government of Israel of certain defense articles and services from the Committee on Foreign Relations.
Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from Vermont.
Thank you. Mr. President, let me begin by thanking Senator Kelly not only for his remarks and his work as a U.S. Senator, but for his service to our country in the military, and I very much appreciate his support for these resolutions. Mr. President, 60% of our people here in the United States live paycheck to paycheck. They are struggling to pay for groceries, for housing, for health care, and increasingly the ability to fill up their gas tanks in their cars in order to get to work. We also have a $37 trillion national debt. Bottom line, the American people, whether they are Democrats, Republicans, or independents, conservatives, moderates, or progressives, want to make certain that their tax dollars are spent responsibly. And in strong and growing numbers, they do not want us to continue spending billions of their taxpayer dollars in support of the illegal, horrific, and expansionist war policies of the Netanyahu government in Israel. Since October 7th, 2023, the United States has provided over $21 billion in military aid to Israel. And today we are saying loudly and clearly, enough is enough. Mr. President, we all know that on October 7th, 2023, Hamas, a terrorist organization, attacked Israel. They killed more than 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and took hundreds of hostages. I believe that there is no disagreement in this chamber that, like any other country on earth, Israel had the absolute right to respond to that barbaric Hamas attack. But, Mr. President, Israel did not have the right to violate international law and wage an all-out war of unspeakable destruction against the entire Palestinian people in what experts have correctly concluded is a genocide. Israel did not have the right, out of a population of 2.2 million, to kill more than 72,000 Palestinians in Gaza and wound over 170,000. That is more than 10% of the population. If that happened here in America, that would be over 30 million Americans dead or wounded. And in Gaza, a strong majority of the dead and wounded are women, children, and the elderly. And by the way, that number is likely an underestimate as to the tragedy, as bodies are literally being pulled out of the rubble every single day. Mr. President, Israel did not have the right to destroy virtually all of Gaza's infrastructure, including its water and sewer systems and its supply of electricity. They did not have the right to demolish every one of Gaza's 12 universities, along with hundreds of schools, dismantling their entire educational system. Vast majority of the children in Gaza today are not in school. Israel did not have the right to indiscriminately bomb civilian neighborhoods and damage or destroy over 90% of the housing units in Gaza. Over 90% damaged or destroyed, resulting in the vast majority of the population there now sleeping in tents. That is where they are today. Israel did not have the right to bomb over 90% of the hospitals in Gaza, hospitals, and kill 1,700 healthcare workers. And, Mr. President, Israel did not have the right to impose a blockade which prevented food, water, and medicine from entering Gaza, resulting in thousands of Palestinians being diagnosed with malnutrition and hundreds actually starving to death. But, Mr. President, today we're not just talking about Gaza. In the West Bank, in direct violation of international law that protects Palestinian territory, Israeli soldiers and settlers since October 2023 have killed over 1,000 Palestinians, including 233 children. During that period, Mr. President, they have demolished more than 6,000 Palestinian homes and established more than 200 new illegal settlements and outposts in Palestinian territory. And let us be clear, because I think there is some confusion about this. These actions are not just the results of some extremists, out-of-control settlers who are just doing whatever they want. Those actions are consistent with Israeli government policy. Netanyahu's security cabinet has approved the most sweeping changes to the West Bank's legal status since 1967, removing nearly all constraints on settlement expansion. Netanyahu himself declared, this is Netanyahu, quote, "There will never be a Palestinian state," end quote. And I say that to some people here who still say, well, we're in favor of a two-state solution. That is not Mr. Netanyahu's position. Quote, he said, "There will never be a Palestinian state." His finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, bragged that new settlement construction in the West Bank would bury, that's his word, bury the idea of a Palestinian state. But, Mr. President, it is not just Gaza and the West Bank. We now know that Netanyahu convinced President Trump to start an unprovoked and unconstitutional war on Iran. For 40 years, Netanyahu has wanted the United States to participate with Israel in a war against Iran, and finally, after 40 years of effort, he finally found in Trump a president willing to go along. He couldn't get Democratic presidents in the past, couldn't get Republican presidents in the past. In Trump, he finally found a president willing to go along. This war in violation of international law has resulted already in the deaths of thousands of civilians, including hundreds of children in Iran and Lebanon, including 26 Israeli civilians who are now dead and 13 American soldiers who have lost their lives so far in this conflict. Mr. President, all over the world, certainly including the United States, hundreds of millions of innocent people are suffering the economic consequences of this war, with higher prices and growing scarcity of basic goods. I believe that in Vermont now, the price of gas, regular gas, is about $4 a gallon. Parts of the country, it is even higher than that. But, Mr. President, for Netanyahu, Gaza was not enough. Attacking Iran was not enough. Netanyahu is now waging a full-blown war of expansion against Lebanon. That war in Lebanon has not only killed more than 2,000 people, but has resulted in Israel occupying 14% of Lebanese territory. Let me repeat that. The war in Lebanon has not only killed more than 2,000 people, but has resulted in Israel occupying 14% of Lebanese territory. Mr. President, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has announced that all Lebanese border villages will be demolished. His exact words, following, quote, the model in Gaza. They're going to demolish border villages. Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, has warned that Dayaya, a suburb of South Beirut, quote, will look like Khan Yunis, end quote, a city in Gaza that Israel reduced to rubble. In other words, what they did in Gaza is now what they intend to do in parts of Lebanon. And these, Mr. President, are not threats, they are promises. For all of the reasons that I have given, and more, and you're going to hear more from some of my colleagues in a few moments, support for Israel in this country has plummeted. Today, according to a recent Pew poll, 80% of Democrats now have an unfavorable opinion of Israel, and 41% of Republicans share that view. And the numbers in all parties among young people are even higher. Young people, whether they are young Democrats, progressives, conservatives, do not want us to continue to fund the horrific war policies of Netanyahu. A recent Quinnipiac poll also found that 60%, including 3/4 of Democrats, 2/3 of independents, and 37% of Republicans, I say that to my Republican colleagues, 37% of Republicans do not want the U.S. sending more military aid to Israel. And that is why, Mr. President, I am offering today 2 joint resolutions of disapproval, the only formal mechanism Congress has to block an arms sale. The first resolution would block the sale of $151 million in 1,000-pound bombs. The second would block $295 million in bulldozers, the machines used to demolish homes in the West Bank and Gaza, and make a Palestinian state physically impossible. Mr. President, the time is long overdue for members of the U.S. Senate to start listening to the American people and not to AIPAC. The time is now for us to end all U.S. military aid to the extremist Netanyahu government, and a yes vote is an important way forward. Mr. President, with that, I would yield to my colleague from Maryland, Senator Chris Van Hollen.